5 bites of this is like 2 shots of whiskey after about 20 minutes. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Live Your Mission show, brought to you by Mission Meets, where our guests share their most actionable advice so that you can live a more mission-centered life. I am your host, Peter Alwood, and today we are joined by Andrew Youderian. He is the owner of the eCommerceFuel membership site for e-commerce owners. But before we get to that, here's what's going on over at Mission Meets headquarters. A couple of quick shout-outs this week. One is to Abigail Formez from an organization called Angels of Strength, and she donates what she calls warrior bags. These are to kids, teens, young adults across the U.S. that are suffering from chronic illness. Some of this goes to Children's Medical Center in New York, Ronald McDonald House, and Long Island. So we donated some product to her so she can put together some of these bags that she wants to get together and out before Christmas time. So that was a pleasure and very cool to see a young person doing good in this world. So very, very cool. And on a different note, our friend Maria Emmerich, her husband Craig, was on the show previously. She made an interesting gingerbread house out of meat. And so she made what she calls a meat house and used some of our sticks. So it was very, very cool to see that. So follow Maria Emmerich, EMMERICH, for delicious recipes, both keto and carnivore. Even if you don't strictly follow those diets, stuff is delicious. So follow Maria over there. They're also just incredibly awesome people. Now back to the show. All right, now on to our guest, Andrew Youderian. Him and I just had an incredible chat where we talked about how he became the owner of eCommerceFuel, how he started that, why he started that, becoming an e-commerce owner, why he thinks that most people maybe shouldn't get into e-commerce. And so he talks about that a little bit when I ask him that question. And we're just kind of all over the place when it comes to his advice on, well, first of all, just like what his current mission is. And he's got 3 of them that he shares, which are incredible that he had those just off the tip of his tongue. And so clearly this is a guy who is paying attention. He doesn't have the blinders on. He knows what he wants in business. He knows what he wants for his members, for his employees, and for the world. And so he shares those 3 missions. Shares the backstory as far as how he got, started, like I said. And then, I asked him just a little bit about, what it's been like growing eCommerceFuel, why e-commerce is important to certain types of people. We get into the Reaper Round where he shares his favorite book and quotes and all this good stuff. And so here's a gentleman who has been very intentional about a couple of things. And these are a couple of things that I point out in the show about sacrifice and about a long time horizon, if that's the right phrase. And so this guy, he was very intentional about living as simply or cheaply, however you want to look at it, as possible in order to save money, in order to be able to give himself the ability, the flexibility to do what he wanted to do, which is start a company. So that was the sacrifice piece. And the other side of it is he's been very intentional about doing what is right for the long term. And that's one thing I really, really want to focus on here for this show is we cannot want the quick and easy thing, right? There are plenty of easy buttons that you could push that would maybe give you a little jolt of a little bit of success, right? But it's not going to give you that long-term success that you want. So you'll be on this hamster wheel of looking for that easy button over and over and over again. Like he talks about in the show, and I'll share this here real quick, is he spent an entire year building content and putting it out for free. How many of us are willing to do that now? Very few, right? Because we want to have a return on that investment immediately. We want to put some content out, start charging for it, build a course, put together a product, put together some content that we're going to share right away. And instead of thinking about it like, I want to build some brand affinity, some loyalty, I want to show folks that I have what it takes, I'm going to put out this content for free. And then eventually it will turn into something that I can then charge for. And so long time horizon, very, very important, but also it must be paired with the sacrifice because you're going to go without. Now, you can't do that if you are strapped for cash, right? And so he set himself up to be able to afford to do this for free. He had a job that he didn't want to work, that he was working at. He had a couple of companies that he had started on the side, and he was working those as well, in order to give him the ability to put out content. He sacrificed time with his family in order to do all those things, and he ground those out for the appropriate period of time, which he touched on the show as well. So I'm not going to belabor it anymore. I probably shared already too much, but excellent episode. Listen to the wisdom coming out of this dude's mouth. So without any further ado, I introduce you to my good friend and just an amazing human being, Andrew Youderian. Andrew, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on with me. I'm excited to chat with you, bro. I think that the audience is going to be excited to hear about e-commerce. E-commerce has always been kind of this tantalizing business that folks that aren't or looking from the outside are really interested in. So I feel like you're going to shed some light on that. And then also just community building, man. I think you're an expert in the field. You do an insanely good job on bringing people together, causing conversation to happen, and really diving deep with them. I know that the first time I went to an eCommerceFuel event, I think it was the one in Laguna Beach, and I just could not believe how tight-knit the community was. Like, people were actually friends there. It wasn't like they were going there to try to get something and exchanging business cards or something. Like, people were actually friends there. They were staying connected on and off the forum. They knew each other's, names. They recognized their faces, and they had something to talk about. And then on top of that, they just really, like, that community has the posture of giving back. Like, they're always looking to help. And I think that's just a testament to the work you've put in, man. So congratulations.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate you being a part of it. I remember our first time chatting in San Clemente over pizzas, and we both realized we're having existential crises living in cold places, and we're trying to figure out how to kind of reshape our lives a little bit. So it's and both of us have done that since then, which is pretty cool. And so anyway, thanks for that, and it's been good having you. It's been good having you as a part of it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Well, we'll jump in, man. When somebody asks you what you do, what do you say? What's your current mission?
I think those are different, right? Like, if somebody asks me what I do versus what my mission is, I have different answers, because I probably should put those. I probably should blend those. But when people ask me, if I'm being totally honest, this is probably not the soundbite you want for the kicking off of the episode. I'm pretty boring. I'm like, I'll say, hey, I run a community for entrepreneurs. And they kind of look at me blankly, and I say, I put on events, develop software, and run an online message board for people who run their own e-commerce stores. And then most people have no idea what that means, and they kind of just say, oh, that's great. And then they go get a drink and leave me alone standing in the corner. If you ask me what my mission is, I kind of a threefold mission. I think when I was thinking about this with our company, I think when people say, like, if you're a paper company, for example, Dunder Mifflin, The Office, their mission potentially is to provide the best quality paper products to people in Pennsylvania. And, like, you aren't going to have employees get behind that, right? Like, that's not going to get people out of bed in the morning. And so after a lot of thought this last year, I've kind of broken it down into three. And I think it's important to have a mission for the people you serve as your customers, for your team, and for the broader world. And so for me, the mission for our customers is to create the best e-commerce community on the entire planet, where people can go to get help and expertise and friendship on any facets of the e-commerce or business journey. For our team members, it's to enable lives of growth and adventure for them. And then for the broader world, it's to help show love to the vulnerable people of the world. And so that's like kind of the threefold mission that we have at our company.
I love that, man. Why are you working on this? Why are those your three missions? Why are you the e-commerce guy? Like, how did you get into, like, even growing this community or starting it?
Yeah, it's, I got out of school, did a job for a couple of years that was kind of soul crushing, got out of that. And I was going to, it's going to be either, I want to do something that I could have a little bit of autonomy, a lot of autonomy, and kind of call my own shots, especially coming out of that position in that finance world. And so I was thinking about either being a fashion photographer.
Really?
You're not laughing. I appreciate it.
I didn't know that about you.
I barely knew that about me too. An options trader, or an e-commerce entrepreneur. And thankfully I picked the last one. So just kind of picked it, spent, a month researching, picking a niche, spent 18 months just hammering away at it day after day after day. that kind of led to a couple of businesses, which I grew, eventually sold those. And along that journey, also started meeting a bunch of e-commerce entrepreneurs like myself, started blogging about that. That kind of turned into a community over the years. And now that's what I focus on most of the time now. So,
Yeah. Yeah. But that doesn't happen by accident, right? I mean, how did you go from blogging about it to then being the dude leading the charge?
I didn't know exactly. I knew that I had a hunch that there was a gap in the market for e-commerce content for independent store owners. People
Mhm.
talked a lot about, Walmart and Amazon and all these big guys, but there was no one talking about it from a, people with, either solopreneurs up to maybe 20-person teams. And so I didn't know what my involvement looked like or what the best way to get involved in a way that could help other people and also be something I could do long term looked like. But I knew that if I wanted to give a shot at figuring it out, I'd have to build some authority and I'd have to have some kind of audience. And so I really just spent a year doing nothing but writing and sharing my experience without selling things, giving away as much as I could, trying to connect, build connections in a network to be able to have a platform to experiment and figure out what that was.
Mhm.
And so did nothing for, I probably, worked probably a full-time job. My 2 e-commerce stores were running not entirely on autopilot, but mostly had a great guy who was running them for me on a day-to-day basis. So I probably spent 75 to 80% of my time at that point working on just content and network, and networking is a horrible word, but building relationships. And so at the end of that time, I had a little bit of an email list. I had some connections and kind of went 2 different directions. I thought I can either run a course like the traditional course running, or I can build a community. And when I thought about the community, I just thought, there's a lot of communities out there for people who are just getting started. I don't have the bandwidth to be able to be like someone who coaches all these people. And I thought it'd be much more interesting and probably beneficial and sustainable long term if that community was focused on people who are actually doing it already. And so it takes longer to grow, takes longer to build that because you're being selective about who comes into there. But I figured that was a little better long term fit. And so spent 2 or 3 months building that out, and that seemed like it had potentially some value, and just kind of ran with it from there.
Yeah. But dude, let's step back for a second, only because I don't want to glaze over it. So you were working a job. You started 2 e-commerce companies. You got them to where they were running themselves, or fairly smooth and efficient. And then you put in a whole year of just producing content without asking for anything in return.
Yeah.
Most people do not have the wherewithal to do all of those things, right? Maybe one of them, right? Like, work my job. That's what I'm going to do. I got no other bandwidth. Like, take me back a little bit. Like, what does that look like? You just decide that you're going to start these 2 companies, get them all running, and then you're going to spend a ton of time just producing content and not selling it or anything. What does that feel like?
It felt like what you had to do if you wanted to have a decent shot at doing it, like it was fun too, in the sense that I'd never done it. And anytime you kind of start into something new, it's new, it's exciting and interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was a lot of work. When kicking it off, I realized that probably the one of the biggest assets I could have was an email list. And so I spent 2 weeks in this cabin in Arizona, holed up, just working 8 hours a day on this ebook, which I released, which now is wildly out of date and would be of very little use to anyone. But at the time, like, it was, it was a 60-page. I was really proud of it. And I think it was, I gave it away for free. And it was the kind of asset where I think at the time, people, once they got it, they were kind of like, holy cow, like, this is really valuable. And they passed it around and organically got handed around and helped spread the brand. So yeah, I mean, in terms of how it felt, it was hard, but it felt like it's, what I had to do. And I was thankful. Thankfully I was in a place where I could afford to spend the time doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But also it's, you looking back, it's easy to look at the story and be like, this was the master plan. This was not the master plan. Like, when I quit my job in finance, I didn't know I was going to do e-commerce, right? Like, when I started the e-commerce companies, I didn't know I was going to start the second company. When I started the second company, I didn't know I was going to decide to parlay into eCommerceFuel. When I started blogging eCommerceFuel, I didn't know I was going to start, I didn't know what the end plan was. I didn't know it was going to be a community. So I think, looking back, one of the things, if there's a lot of things I'm not good at, but I would say one thing that I feel like has been helpful is doing things in a way that moves the ball forward, even if you don't know what the end game is, in order to keep your options open. So like, when I was working in that job, I wasn't making that much, making reasonable money, but I lived like a pauper. So when I got done, I was 25 years old. I didn't have any debt, and I had 50K in the bank, which is not an
Mhm.
insane amount of money. But when you're single and you're 50 and you're 25, that's enough to live on for 3 years and build a business, right?
Yeah.
Like, and there's no way I could have done what I did without having anyway. So I think just having optionality, doing things in a way that keeps your options open while at the same time not just standing still was helpful.
Yeah. I think one thing to further the point, Andrew, is that you did a couple of things that people have to be willing to do in order to have long-term success. One is that you sacrificed. And so you sacrificed time. You could have been sitting on your butt after work doing nothing or watching the game or doing whatever. You decided to invest that time into your future instead. So that's one of the things, like, you sacrificed a lot of the time. I mean, you put the time in order to grow. The other thing is that you had what I think, what appears to me as an outsider, is you had a long time horizon. You were like, you know what? I'm going to build this the right way so that it has longevity. And I think that's one of the big pieces missing in business right now, where people are trying to make a quick buck. They want it to be really fast. Like, I think a lot of people in your situation would have been putting out content and almost immediately trying to sell it. They would immediately trying to monetize. And that's, to me, is just not the right way to go about it. If you can afford it, which you put yourself in a position to afford it, right? Like, it wasn't like this miraculous thing that came down from heaven. Like, Andrew, you can afford to not monetize on this thing for a year. Like, you set your life up to be able to afford to put out content for free for a whole year. And you did that because you knew it was the right thing. Because if you wanted to have longevity, you needed to provide value, like continue to provide value. And that's, I think, is what has been built in and baked into eCommerceFuel, is like, you're giving so much that everybody else wants to give too. And so I think that's one of the things that the audience has to key in on, is like, you've got to sacrifice and you've got to have a long time horizon and bring that value.
It's so so much easier in the long run if you take a long-term approach, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. So it's, I mean, it's hard and it takes a while to ramp up, but there's really no shortcuts to doing it if you want to be able to do it long-term. So,
Yeah. So I think you stated this already, but did you have any idea that eCommerceFuel, or ECF as the insiders call it, did you know ECF was going to become the beast that it is? Like, what was the moment where you realized, like, oh my gosh, this is way bigger than I ever thought it was going to be. This is about way more than I ever thought it was going to be about. What was that like? And shout out to Kevin Stecco. He's, I put out a poll. You saw it, I'm sure, asking for questions from the forum members, and Kevin, he shot this one out. So shout out to him. I think it's a great question. Like, take us back. What was it like when you realized that ECF was like this kind of a big deal?
yeah, well, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate that. I don't, to be totally honest, like I'm very proud of what we've built from our team's perspective, and also from a lot of the members who've been with us for a while's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't necessarily feel like I've gotten there, like or we've gotten there. Like, I feel like I have a lot of love and respect for the community, but I feel I don't know if I've ever got to the point where I'm like, wow, this is a big deal. It's more like I have kind of a vision for where I would still want to continue to take it
Mm-hmm.
in 5 or 10 years. And I think potentially part of the curse of being an entrepreneur is you always move your goalpost, right? And so, if we're lucky enough to get there, then probably will be equally as unreflective as I am right now. But I don't know if I've ever had that moment.
There was never a moment when you were on stage talking and looking out at the audience of 1,000 people or whatever and thought, holy crap, like, these many people came because of something that I started a long time ago. Some people are traveling 24 hours from Australia or New Zealand or whatever to get there. You haven't had a moment like that?
I mean, that's always cool. Like ECF Live, when you kick off, like last year, we had it in New Orleans and
Mm-hmm.
had a good crew, and definitely not 1,000. It was about, just shy of 200 people, but 200 great people. And
Yeah.
that's always cool when especially at the opening party there, and everyone's there, the energy is really high, and to welcome everyone to something like that, like that's really fun. And I
Mm-hmm.
definitely have had moments where, like, I'm like, this is really fun, and this is a great group of people. But yeah, I don't know if I've had the moment yet where I feel like I don't know if I've had the moment yet where I feel like we've arrived, if that makes sense. Because I feel like that's kind of what you're asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll get there.
I hope so.
I think you're there right now, but that's okay. I know the feeling, dude. I know it's like one of these things where like you said, you do move the goalposts, and you do, if you're looking to strive for better, this becomes the new normal, and you want another, you want to strive for the next level. So why should the audience care about e-commerce? Like, why do you think e-commerce is like such a special beast? And of course, I've got an affinity for it because we own eCom company, and I'm on my. I've done more than one, but as well. But why should the audience care if they're not interested in e-commerce, or it wasn't one of these things that was on their radar? Like, what's your pitch to them?
This is probably not going to be what you want to hear. I'm going to be a horrible guest for you. This is the last time I ever come on your podcast.
Yeah,
so
we're going to cut it short right now.
I'm going to milk it for all I can get. While I have the podium, we're gonna just do carnage. I would say I don't think they should.
Okay.
I mean, I think you think back. Starting any business is hard, e-commerce included, and starting mine, I had a huge fire under my tail. I didn't want to go back to that job that I had for 2.5 years. And I felt like this might be my one chance in my life to do something that causes a major inflection point where I can change the trajectory of my whole life. Mm-hmm. And so I had something I have a huge motivation to get that done. E-commerce in and of itself, if someone's not interested in it, I don't think they should get into it, because it's going to be really hard for them to talk themselves into it, especially if it's like they just feel like it's a great way to make money. Like, I think you got to be pragmatic. I think you can't just say, oh, I don't want to do work. I don't want to do anything, that's additive on a value basis. And I'm just a huge fan of the Smurfs, and I'm just going to, sit around and watch Smurf stuff all day. Like, not going to work out well for you. But at the same time, I think you have to have some level of, at a minimum, aptitude, ideally a little bit of interest, or at least some kind of driving passion, not even passion, some kind of something driving you towards something. So, my first caveat is, if somebody is not interested in e-commerce, zero interest sounds horrible. Mm-hmm. I don't think they should come this way. The one thing I do think is interesting about it is Ezra Firestone did an interesting video comparing different business models. And he's done a lot of different things. He's been in the SaaS world, so software, e-commerce, the events business, also like the information business, things like that. Mm-hmm. And the point he made, which I thought was a pretty salient one about e-commerce, was that it is by far one of the easiest businesses to scale. The product side is hard. The marketing side is hard, right? But once you get those in place, we've got this wonderful jerky. I tried a little bit of it.
I can't wait for you to eat it.
I thought you sent me the hot stuff, man.
Yeah.
This?
Listen. You can eat the whole bag. You're hungry, right? I mean, at least you're hungry.
I am, yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I'm going to be eating my words. It's going to be painful. But I mean, you have this bag of jerky, and obviously, like, a ton of work goes into finding great beef, to finding the great recipe, good recipe, the packaging, all this kind of stuff. Tons of upfront work. Mm-hmm. Once you get that down, at that point, it's not easy, but it is easier than scaling a lot of other types of business models. Yep. Because from there, as long as you take care of customers well, as long as you are doing the things you should to run a good, ethical, well functioning business, the product is, you're not going to have crazy customer service issues. You don't have to debug software for it. It scales up fairly easily. So I think that is one interesting part about e-commerce, that if you aspire to build something large that you can scale easily and has a large reach, e-commerce is a great option.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. It's a ton of upfront cost and time and research and headache. But if you figured out how to acquire customers and you're taking care of them, as you said, and you're putting out a good product, then yeah, it's just a larger purchase order, right? Larger manufacturing run in our case. Once the business starts taking off. And so of all the things that you've had to get better at in order to become, you're not going to call yourself an expert, I can already tell. Of all the things you've had to get better at, what's been the hardest for you?
I think leadership, leading people, like, without a doubt, that's really hard.
Yeah. In what way?
People are complicated and people are messy, myself most of all included. Mm-hmm. And I think we like to think that you can just slot people, into a role and they can work like robots, and that works for a while. But if you take that approach, you're not going to have people with you for very long, or the people that do stay with you for a long time are not going to be people you would want to stay with you for a long time. Mm-hmm. So I think, like, a lot of times we as individuals don't even necessarily know what we want. And as a leader, you have to be able to tap into your team and sell them on a vision. Not even just sell them, like, authentically be able to deliver on a vision that shows where you're going, how you can also help them develop. And and you got to have a compelling vision to be able to do that. You've got to deal with people's weaknesses. You got to deal with your own weaknesses. I think most people, I would be surprised if you asked 100 entrepreneurs and you said, what's the hardest part of business? I'd be shocked if 80 to 90% plus of them did not say leading people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you think? And you could totally, I've already totally taken 3 of your questions and thrown them out the window. The depth strategy me here. Would you disagree?
No, I don't disagree, man. People are the hardest part. We're talking about scaling earlier, like most difficult to scale. Like every single person adds an additional complexity, list of questions, more noise to the system, because we're not robots, like you said. And so, but also that's where all great companies come from. I'm sure there's these, unicorn companies, they post on UCF sometimes too. Like I went to 10 million, 0 employees, but for the most part, like that's how you're going to differentiate a great company from a good company, is because you've done a great job, not only leading, but figuring out how to filter and hire for the best people, and figuring out how to keep those people. And so it is one of these things where if you can become good at that, a lot of the other stuff can follow. It's not the end all be all, but it is such a huge component of whether your business is going to have lasting effects or not.
Oh yeah. I mean, if I could say you're world class at anything in the world, I would say it'd be hiring and leading. Because if you can do that, you can do hiring, leading, and shaping a vision, right? If you can do that, I mean, you can overthrow countries. Not that I want to, but I don't know why that came to mind. It's a bad story, but just, there's an immense amount of there's a lot of power that could be used, for good or for bad, but it's tremendous amount of leverage in that.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I got a left field question for you.
Yeah. What's up? Hit me.
This is another ECF member question. This is from Eric Beardbrand. Thanks, dude.
I love Eric. I love Kevin.
He's great, dude. What's this whole hippie capitalist thing about?
Oh man, that's funny. I wonder how so I own the domain capitalisthippie.co. And I've been meaning to start blogging about it for I don't know, 6-12 months.
Okay.
My wife calls me Annie. My wife calls me the capitalist hippie because I love business. I have a lot, been doing it for a while, but I also am very, I don't know, fairly free spirited. I love to travel. I don't need a lot of stuff. Like I have a wonderful family, which I love dearly, but if it was just me at this point in my life, I would have 0 qualms having a 1-bedroom, 400, 500, 600 square foot apartment, very Spartan, and living out of the van for to third to half the year. And so I feel a lot of times there's people that don't bridge both of those. You got people that are super on the, the chill hippie side or crazy workaholic side, but I feel like there's parts of me in both of those worlds. And I like the idea, one of the things with our business, that thinking about the mission for our team, and myself included in that team, is I want our team members to have lives of growth and adventure, right? Like, so we have, for all of our full-time employees, they get a month sabbatical every year at the company.
Wow.
And so to be able to go do things like that, because I want to work hard, like, I want to bust it. And I am an ambitious person, but if that means I can't have any fun adventures, if that means I can't take my kids camping, if that means I can't hopefully take off for, a 2-week cycling adventure, in the next, couple of years, you're like, why am I doing all this to some effect? There's other things I want to help the people in our community. And I also want to, help the broader world, but, having a life that's rich and has growth and adventure is important to me too. So that's kind of where the whole capitalist hippie thing boils down. And I'd love to start blogging on that site about, entrepreneurship, adventure, and fatherhood, speaking specifically to, people like us, like dads who are entrepreneurs, because it's hard to balance all that stuff, right? Like, you have to be really intentional to do it. And so I'd like to start trying to do the best I can to balance that and talk about it as well.
Yeah, it's insanely difficult. And, previous show, Slow Hustle, was about a lot of that. And I commend you for putting that out there. And I think you should definitely get behind it. You're like the perfect guy to do it, man. And just to piggyback on like what you said, I think that this is one thing that we have to remember. And this is not just entrepreneurs. I mean, if you got a job, it's the same. You never went into that position. You were not thinking for a minute, like, I can't wait to get hired by this company, or I can't wait to start this business for myself so I can work myself to death. Like that was never the goal. That's never been the goal. Nobody's ever said that in the history of the world. I don't think anyways. And so, but we find ourselves in that position. Like we work ourselves into that, and it happens very slippery, right? Like it's like very slowly, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a little bit more overwork, and just a little bit more overwork, and a little less time, and a little less working out, and a little less free time, and a little less boredom. It's just like keeps happening, and it compounds, and eventually you find yourself in a serious position of overwork where you're not enjoying your life anymore. You're not enjoying the fruits of your labor. You're not spending time with your kids or your wife or your husband or whatever, you know? And so I think it's critical. I love this idea of the 1 month sabbatical. If you work for Mission Meats, stop listening now. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But you know, I love the idea because you have to build it in. Here's the thing, dude, and you know this already. If it's not scheduled, it won't happen.
Yeah, totally.
It's not happening. You put meetings on there, right? You put meetings on your calendar. We got to schedule vacations a year in advance, right? You got to put those things on the calendar. Sabbatical is a great thing to put on the calendar. Long weekends, put them on the calendar. Because otherwise, all your work's going to creep in. And before you know it, you've got no margin, no free time to do anything and not to enjoy your life, but to do your work. And even if you love your work, which I do and you do, it still can't be all of it. Like this can't be the whole reason you were put on this earth was to work yourself to the bone and be a kind of a robot behind the computer, just pounding away at keys or whatever you do at work.
And the other thing too is if you don't have that time, I'm reading a book right now. It's called Rest, and just started it. But the premise of it is rest is not just something you do because you need a break. Rest is a very core part of the creative process and the work process, because if you don't, largely both of what we're doing, Peter, you and I, like it's less about manual labor, even though I know you love that. We were talking about that before we hopped on, and more about like intellectual labor, right? Like you get done at the end of the day, you sit down and, if Melissa asks you to get up and do yard work, you're probably it's not gonna be a big deal because you're not mentally or physically exhausted. But if she's like, hey, can you help me make decisions about these 3 things? You're going to be like, oh, I don't know if you're like me, but I'm just like, I
am exactly like this. Yeah.
I have made 200 decisions today.
Yep.
Please just make them for me. And so that rest, it's so important, not just to enjoy life a little bit, but from a work perspective, it makes you more creative. It gives you more depth. It makes you better at what you do. And if you don't do it, you're going to work longer, but the results and the output's going to suffer.
Yes. I love that, man. Further it just a little bit more. I've started scheduling meeting time with my wife.
That's awesome.
Middle of the week, Wednesday lunches is what we do now. And I did it because otherwise I'm just like that. I don't have, like, she'll talk to me about like the big decisions for our family. I got nothing left. Like, I don't have any room left. Like, I'm like starting to nod off. It's 9:30, 10 o'clock. I'm in bed, about to fall asleep. Hey, by the way, I've got this big decision we need to make. I'm like, dude, I can't think about it. I can't. And here's the thing. What's wrong about it, like, it's totally natural, but what's wrong about it is like, dude, I had an hour-long coffee meeting that day with someone. They're asking advice about X, Y, or Z, which happens to you all the time, I know. And I gave them plenty of attention and advice and feedback, but I can't give it to my family. Totally screwed up, right? And so, dude, so a couple of practical tips aside from this, right? Like rest, I think is a huge one. I think our society in general, if I'm going to make a generalization, this is probably a safe one. We have no margin. We don't have any space. We don't have the rest. This is where good ideas come from. On the toilet, in the shower. It's because we have some quiet time. But toilet time's even been ruined now with the iPhone, with smartphones. Like that's completely out the window, right? We've ruined that. And so now it's just for the shower until you can use your iPhone in the shower, which I guess you can do that. What other advice do you have, man? Someone who's trying to live out their mission, whether it's in e-commerce or outside of that, if you had a couple of tips, you're like, this is what you need to do. What is it?
I will say, for everything we just promoted for adventure and rest and all these things, I do think there's a period of at least, at a bare minimum, 1 year, probably more like 2 to 2.5, let's say 1 to 3 years. I don't know exactly where you got to be willing to really bust it for at the beginning of the business. I don't know any entrepreneurs who have taken a very balanced approach in the beginning and had phenomenal results, or even average results. And so I think what we're talking about is a great framework for once you've put in, kind of put in that time and tenure to get something. Because I mean, getting something going from zero to up to speed is a insane amount of work, right?
Insane.
And so like looking in the future, I'm much more inclined to buy a business in the future versus build one from scratch for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
But
But here's the
yeah,
thing. Here's the thing, though. On that note, people do that and they start that way, and they're wearing all the hats, and it is completely necessary. Like I've actually spent every Wednesday about 30 minutes. I started texting customers because I'm like, I want to be back to where I'm like really connected, just for a little bit, capture some more information. Wearing all the hats is fine, and I think it's totally necessary. I think the issue is that people do that forever. Like they don't stop doing it. They're
right.
just continuing to do that, right? So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that was it. And in terms of other advice, you said,
Yeah.
just in business, life in general.
I think that if for people that are trying to live out their mission, and whether they've just now started thinking about starting, they're on that journey. What are a couple of tips as it pertains to your journey? Like these are the things that, rest is a great one. Do you have another one that you want to kind of put out there? Like these are the things that you got to look out for.
Yeah, maybe I'll just say, from my perspective, I'll just think about things that I think have been important over the years. I think being very intentional with your money is an important one. In terms of how I think this is entirely true, but I think a lot of people in the world can either be put into the bucket of looking at money as a way to acquire things or to acquire flexibility and autonomy. Right. And so thinking about that, saving a lot from an early age, just saving and being careful with money. And if you can develop a life where you're not concerned with status, man, it saves you a lot of worrying, saves you a lot of money. You're going to probably end up with way better friends, way better relationships. Like status for status sake is a dangerous slope. Not to say you can't have nice things in certain areas you love, but yeah, if you have to have the best of everything primarily because you want to impress other people, it's gonna your life is gonna not end up as rich, I think, as it could be in the most important way that wealth is measured. I would say, when you think about like who you pick as a spouse, I think is a really huge important issue. And I think, it's funny, Annie and I have talked about like what's the most important thing in marriage. And I think it would have to be like love. Let's love aside. I think respect is the most. And I think respect, you can look at it in marriage and friendships and just about anything. And I feel like you can say just about anything in the world as long as you do it in a respectful tone. Like it's amazing what you can get away with saying if you say it in a very calm, loving, respectful voice, right? And it's amazing what can get you in trouble, very benign comments, when you say them harshly. Mm-hmm. So I think that applies not just to romantic relationships, but also to your team, things like that. Mm-hmm. I think friendship is a big one for like, especially for dudes. I mean, there's been tons of studies about like community in general in our society is probably at, historic lows, historic on like a 20,000 year timeline.
Yeah. Like real community.
Yeah. Real community, real relationships, deep friendships, especially among guys in their 30s and 40s. They've done studies that like, I think they say that for most men, loneliness is more of an epidemic and more dangerous to your health than smoking, which is crazy, right? Mm-hmm. And so thinking through nurturing some of those like good guy relationships, or just good relationships in general as a guy, I think is really important. So those would be a few of the things that just when you ask for general advice that pop to mind for me that I think are important. And I do a very imperfect job of trying to live out, but try to. So
yeah, those are very, very good ones, man. Thank you for that. All right, man. We're going to switch gears to the fire round, right? The Reaper round. I just misspoke. It's the Reaper round.
Dude, I think we're running out of time here. You both have booked this, I think. I'm afraid I'm going to have to run. This has been awesome. Live your mission.
Thanks you. I love it. This is where our guests answer some rapid fire questions while they attempt to eat some of the bag, an entire bag.
Oh my gosh.
Of our Carolina Reaper beef jerky. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
How does it smell, man? Is it good?
So you realize that you signed a waiver saying you're going to pay for any medical treatment, right? Okay.
Yeah. Excellent. Somebody else signed it.
Excellent.
Like, yeah. Yes. Like Jeter Bawad or something. Yeah. It smells good. It smells good. Yeah. Burn your nose hairs off. Oh my God. All right, man. I'm going to let you take a bite and then I will ask this question. Favorite book? Could be something you've read in the last year. That's a classic for you. Something, very, very recent. It doesn't have to be business related.
Probably The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not business related.
Why do you like it?
It's very funny and adventure filled.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of nostalgia from it because I read it as a kid.
Got it. Okay. Any quotes you live by?
never go on podcasts while eating hot spicy chicken. It's a long time, like standing quote, kind of a pillar no, I would say I like Theodore Roosevelt a lot. I like his quote, speak softly and carry a big stick. I think my dad's a great example of this. He's a very humble man and a quiet guy, but like when stuff gets real, he won't shy away from telling you, or he won't shy away from conflict. But he's not someone you would ever guess would go out and seek it. And I think that's really cool. I think having a backbone, but not being someone who's obnoxious about it, is a great way to live.
Got it. Love that. Best under $100 purchase that's impacted your life most recently.
Not this one per se, but like Contigo mugs, $20, $25. I drink copious amounts of coffee. I bike a lot. And so being able to fill that thing out, toss it in there, seal it off, throw it in with a $1,500 laptop and not worry about it getting spilled all over the place is pretty great.
Yeah, I love that as well, man. In the last year, is there something that you've, a new belief or behavior or habit that's most improved your life? Or to say it another way, is there something you've changed your mind about? Something you had like a really strong kind of, stake in the ground, like this is what I believe, and you've actually changed your mind on it?
I would say, it's a good question. I'd say probably the biggest habit I've gotten better at in the last year or so is just eating better. And he's been a great force for that. And just, the way stuff starts compounding, especially once you get into your 30s. And so, it's starting to get a little fiery, man. I feel like it's starting to slur my speech a little bit here. Like 5 bites of this is like 2 shots of whiskey after about 20 minutes. So just eating a little bit better, I think is a big one. Being a little more intentional about what I put in my body, what I'm thinking, what I'm eating, and how that also affects the way I perform at work and just my ability to stay focused and feel good. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of these things is what's interesting is that as founders, or people that are just like striving for excellence and working a lot will neglect that. And I think the easiest way to flip it is if you are trying to accomplish the best of your abilities and knowing that food can fuel that growth, is incredibly motivating. So you can not care about food at all, but if you know it's going to increase your output by 10%, you're willing to do it, right? You're willing to eat anything, especially things that you don't want to eat because they're too healthy, right? There it is, bro. Carolina Reaper jerky. You're taking it down, dude. You're doing well.
I'm trying not to disappoint, I mean, what is the inability to speak for 4 days if I can, deliver from my friend on a podcast?
That's right. That's right. That's friendship. That's real man friendship right there. All right. I'm flipping one of your podcast questions back at you. And this is Ryan Flynn from ECF. He reminded me of this.
What's up, Ryan?
How long do you wear your jeans before you wash them?
Once they get visibly dirty or start to smell, which usually ends up being like probably 2 to 3 weeks, I would say.
2 to 3 weeks. Okay. What's been the average on the show?
Can you see the sweat like running down my forehead here?
Is that milk or is that water?
It's water. I thought about doing milk, but I felt like, again, I think I told Annie I was going to sneak some milk in there, and she's like, "You cannot do that. You wimp out. That's cheating."
I knew I liked her. her.
Yeah. She's good. Less wimpy. Sorry, what was the question?
What's been the average time between washings on the show?
I'd probably say it depends if it's a male or a female. The females are much more hygienic than the males. It seems to be.
Surprise.
Yeah, shocking, right? I just want to say like 2 to 3 weeks, probably about in there.
Okay.
All right. People are not. Jeans are one of those things. People don't wash them right.
No.
I'm need to be. I mean,
right there.
Yeah, they're manufactured.
And mine are not even about how dirty they are. It's like they just start to get looser and baggier, and they just look bad, right? But if they stayed like where they fit the way they're supposed to fit when they're washed, I don't know if
because they get so coated with dirt and they just start hanging, get heavy down on your pants. That's same thing happens to me, man.
Yeah, the good thing is they stand up in the corner, and I can just jump right back in them. All right, dude. So a couple just last questions here for you. What is something a regular listener of your podcast or member of the forum, you're really having a hard time now? I love this.
I'm good. I don't know what you're talking about. Totally misreading the situation.
What is something that a member or a listener wouldn't know about you?
I don't know if I have any deep, dark secrets or hobbies here that I can throw out
No?
there. I'd say I was arrested in college, quasi-arrested, for breaking into an underground tunnel system an hour before my 3 a.m. funk show and almost didn't make it on the air.
Wait. 3 a.m. funk show? What is this all about?
I had a 3 a.m. funk show in college at my radio station in Montana.
Didn't know that. I didn't know that. Everybody else knew that evidently because you didn't share that one. So you got arrested, didn't make your show.
Barely made it. They arrested us, and then I don't know if we technically got arrested, thrown in the back of a cop car. They let us out essentially, in their opinion, because the jail was full, or they just didn't want to deal with us. I'm not sure. It sounded kind of like a lame excuse. Apparently, if you get, you murder someone, the jail's full. What? Well, we'll see you next week. But yeah, that was more or less the story.
Got it. All right.
Yeah.
I like that.
Dude, this stuff is potent. Well done. Well done, sir.
Thank you very much.
Very impressive.
Final question. Favorite Mission Meats flavor?
Of course.
Carolina Reaper, of course.
Dude,
every day.
Yeah.
Right.
And
breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
I'm going to regret this, but to prove to you, it's my favorite flavor.
Oh, last piece.
Mm.
Phew.
That was bigger than I was hoping.
All right, man. Well, dude, thanks for the time. Appreciate you coming on, bro. If for the listener, the viewer that wants to keep tabs on what you're working on, what's the best way? And he can't talk anymore. It's so hot.
All right. Oh my good. Now that I'm literally a hot mess here, eCommerceFuel.com is the best place. So if you happen to be an e-commerce entrepreneur and I have any shred of dignity left that you are willing to give me as I sweat profusely in front of you here, we run a community for 7-figure plus store owners, and also do a podcast about e-commerce, but also all things business. It's just called the eCommerce Fuel podcast. So those are the two: eCommerceFuel.com or searching for eCommerce Fuel. Wherever you find your podcast, those are the best places.
Very good. And you got a weekly, or is it every 2-week newsletter? How often does that thing come out?
Yeah, it's a kind of a podcast / newsletter. It comes out every other week for news, e-commerce news, and then there's the podcast comes out every Friday. So it comes about 6 times a month.
Okay. All right. Very good. Andrew, thanks, man.
Dude, this has been fun. Apart from the last 2 minutes, although it's kind of been fun in a sick kind of way too. So thanks, man. This has been a good time.
Thanks, man. See ya. Thanks so much for tuning in. It means so much to me and the entire Live Your Mission team. Now, this is the point where I ask you to subscribe, leave a review, share the show with a friend. Would you do that for me, please? It's super helpful. Helps us grow the show, helps us bring you better guests, helps us not have to have advertising on here, all that good stuff. So what do you say? Help me out. Share the show, please. Okay. Now, we're also putting out content for viewers and listeners like you. Have told us what they want, right? You told us what you want, and we're bringing it to you, okay? So if there's something that you want, either a topic or a person or something you want to learn about, whatever, because it's the same thing as a topic, shoot me an email, peter@missionmeats.co. That's peter@missionmeats.co, and I'll see what I can do. I think I can do it for you. I probably can. You never know. Shoot me an email. And if you want to be part of the Mission Reaper Challenge, tag us. Post some stuff of you eating it. And if it's hilarious, if we love it, if it's creative, if it's all those things, we will pick you. I will talk about you on the show, and you will win $100 in free Mission Meats delicious snacks. So give that a shot. All right. Now get out there and live your mission. Thank you.